Keanu Reeves sat backstage, running his fingers through his tousled hair, his mind a blur of excitement and nervous energy. It had been a while since he had appeared on a talk show, and this one, The Tonight Show, with none other than the infamous host Jason Pierce, promised to be a thrilling event. His longtime friend Sandra Bullock was joining him on stage, and the two of them had prepared for a light-hearted evening of laughter, stories, and shared memories. But as Keanu sat in his dressing room, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. There was an unease in the air, something unspoken, something he couldn't quite pinpoint. He had been in the business long enough to know that things often weren't as they seemed, but tonight he hoped it would be different. Sandra entered the room, her bright smile lighting up the space, immediately putting him at ease. "Hey, you all right?" she asked, noticing the look on his face. Keanu smiled back, his calm demeanor returning. "Yeah, just a little nervous, I guess. It's been a while." "You'll be fine," Sandra assured him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Besides, we're in this together." The two shared a brief laugh, and Keanu's nerves started to settle. As they made their way to the stage, the lights were blinding, and the audience's energy was palpable. Laughter echoed in the studio, and the camera crew was ready to capture every moment. As they sat down next to Jason, the host's smooth charisma filled the room. Jason Pierce had always been known for his sharp wit and cutting-edge commentary, often making even the most serious guests squirm with his pointed questions. Tonight, however, Keanu and Sandra had no idea they were about to face the most unexpected moment of their careers. Jason greeted the audience with his signature grin. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have two incredible stars here tonight, Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock, two icons who have charmed the world for decades. But tonight I'm going to take you behind the scenes of their perfect lives and show you something you've never seen before." Keanu and Sandra exchanged a glance, unsure of what was about to come next. "So," Jason began, leaning forward, his tone shifting, "you two have worked together for years, but there's a rumor going around that your friendship has turned into something much more. A secret relationship, perhaps? Is there any truth to that, Keanu?" Keanu's eyes widened for a moment. The question had come out of nowhere. He glanced at Sandra, who seemed equally stunned. They hadn't prepared for this. "Jason," Keanu started, trying to keep his voice steady. "We've been friends for a long time, that's all there is to it." But Jason wasn't finished. His next words cut deeper. "Oh, come on, Keanu, the world wants to know. The chemistry between you two is palpable, especially on screen. So why not tell us the truth? Are you hiding something?" The audience held its breath, and the tension in the room became unbearable. Sandra shifted uncomfortably, her hand instinctively reaching out to Keanu's for support. She wasn't sure how to react either. "Jason," she said, her voice calm but firm, "that's an incredibly personal question. We're here to talk about the movie, not gossip about our private lives." Jason's smile never faltered. "Oh, I know, but come on. This is what the people really want to know, right?" He turned to the audience, holding up his hands for approval. The crowd cheered, egging him on. Keanu felt his heart race. He wasn't prepared for this kind of attack. It was supposed to be a fun night, a night of laughter and stories from the set of their latest film. But now they were being dragged into a conversation about something far more personal, something they weren't ready to share. Just when it felt like the situation couldn't get any worse, Jason dropped the bombshell. "I've got something here, something that might just shake things up even more." He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out an envelope. "This is a recording I got my hands on, footage of Keanu and Sandra, talking about each other in ways no one has ever heard before." The room fell silent as Keanu's heart stopped. What was he talking about? Sandra's grip tightened around his hand as Jason played the recording. The footage was grainy, but there was no mistaking the voices. It was a conversation between Keanu and Sandra, recorded in a private moment, one they had never intended to share with the world. The words were intimate, vulnerable, and, above all, unexpected. Keanu's face turned pale as the words echoed through the speakers. "I trust Sandra more than anyone in this business. I don't think I could do it without her." Sandra's voice followed closely behind. "Keanu has been there for me more times than I can count. I wouldn't be the same without him." It was nothing scandalous, nothing that betrayed their friendship, But in the context of the talk show, it sounded like a revelation. The audience gasped, the cameras zoomed in, and Keanu and Sandra sat in stunned silence. Jason turned to the camera, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "So there you have it, folks. Are they just friends, or is there something more?" The atmosphere was thick with tension. Keanu and Sandra exchanged another glance, this time with more uncertainty. The world was watching, and the truth of their relationship, something so personal, was being put on public display, twisted in ways they never expected. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning, Jason announced, his voice full of excitement. "What's one thing that always pushes you forward even when things get tough?" Keanu and Sandra sat there speechless. The last question hung in the air, unanswered, as the camera zoomed in on their faces. The night had barely begun, but their lives had just been changed forever. The backstage area buzzed with activity as the cameras went dark and the audience filed out. But for Keanu and Sandra, the night had just begun to unravel in ways they could never have anticipated. The question now wasn't about their movie or the work they had put in, but about their lives and their trust in the people they once considered friends. Keanu leaned against the wall, trying to calm his breathing. The recording of their private conversation still echoed in his ears. He couldn't believe Jason Pierce had aired that. Those words were never meant for the public. They had been vulnerable, honest, and now they were being twisted into something much darker, something that felt like a betrayal. Sandra stood a few feet away, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her face flushed with a mix of anger and disbelief. She was usually so composed, so sure of herself, but right now all she could feel was the sting of exposure. "Can you believe that?" she finally spoke, her voice shaking with frustration. "He just put us out there like that." Keanu shook his head, his jaw clenched. "I don't know what I was expecting, but that was brutal. This is the last thing I thought would happen tonight." The crew continued to move around them, oblivious to the emotional turmoil the two stars were enduring. No one seemed to care about the fallout from what had just transpired. For Keanu and Sandra, however, it was the moment everything shifted. As the night wore on, the whispers about their relationship spread like wildfire. Social media exploded with rumors and speculation. Headlines flashed across news outlets, each one more outrageous than the last. People were fascinated by the idea of Keanu and Sandra being something more than just colleagues. The footage, though nothing scandalous, had planted the seed of doubt and intrigue in the minds of the public. "Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock, are they more than just friends?" read one headline. Another screamed, "New footage leaked, Keanu and Sandra's secret bond exposed." Back in their hotel rooms, both Keanu and Sandra tried to focus on the next steps, but their phones kept buzzing with messages and notifications. Calls from their managers, publicists, even friends. They all wanted to know how they were going to handle the situation. How would they respond? What would they say to the press? Keanu stared at his phone, his thumb hovering over the screen. "I don't know how to respond to this, Sandy," he said, his voice low. "This feels like an attack." Sandra, sitting on the edge of her bed, didn't look at him at first. She knew exactly how he felt. She had lived through enough tabloid rumors to know the drill, but this was different. This was about their integrity, their friendship. It was raw and personal. "I'm just so angry," she muttered. "Angry that someone would do this. Angry that Jason did this to us. He knew what we were going through, and he still chose to air that crap on live TV. He put us on the spot in front of millions." "I know," Keanu replied, standing up and pacing the room. "But it's not just him. It's the whole system, Sandy. The tabloids, the public, they love tearing people down. We're just the latest victims in their game." Sandra looked up at him then, her expression softening. "We can't let them win," she said quietly. "We need to take control of this narrative, but we have to do it on our terms." Keanu nodded, the weight of the situation slowly sinking in. "You're right. We can't let them define us. We have to find a way to shut this down." The next day, the calls kept coming. But this time, Sandra had a plan. She called Keanu early. In the morning, her voice firm and decisive. "We need to talk to Jason directly, face to face, no more games." Keanu was quiet for a moment. He wasn't sure about confronting Jason. After all, the man had humiliated them on live TV, but there was something about Sandra's tone that made him realize she was right. The only way to take back control was to face the problem head-on. They arranged to meet with Jason at the studio that afternoon. It would be a private meeting, no cameras, no publicists, just the three of them. Sandra was determined to get to the bottom of why Jason had chosen to betray them like that. When they arrived at the studio, Jason was waiting in his office, looking as cool and collected as ever. He greeted them with a forced smile and a handshake. His demeanor almost patronizing. "Keanu, Sandra, it's good to see you. I know last night was intense, but it was all in good fun, right?" He tried to laugh it off, but neither of them was amused. "Good fun?" Sandra's voice was sharp, her eyes narrowing. "You aired a private conversation between us, Jason. You humiliated us in front of millions of people. There's nothing funny about that." Jason leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms, looking unfazed. "Come on, Sandy. You know how the game works. People are interested in the truth. The public wants to know what's really going on behind the scenes, especially with you two. You've been so close for so long, people want answers." "Jason," Keanu interjected, his voice calm but firm, "we trusted you. That wasn't just some playful comment. That was a real conversation between two friends. You crossed a line last night, and we need to know why." Jason's smile faded, but he wasn't ready to back down. "You two are bigger than that. Your personal lives? They're part of the deal. You're both celebrities. The public expects to know everything. You can't hide behind your private. Lives forever." Sandra stepped forward, her face serious. "We're not hiding, Jason. We're just asking for respect. What happened last night? It wasn't just about us. It was about all the people who believe in what we do. You've made us look like we're playing a game, when in reality, we're just trying to live our lives." Jason's eyes flickered. For a moment, perhaps a hint of guilt or regret, but he quickly masked it. "I didn't mean to cause any harm, but you can't deny that it got people talking." Keanu took a deep breath. "We didn't sign up for this. You don't get to turn our friendship into a spectacle for your ratings." There was a long silence as Jason looked between them, his posture slightly shifting. Finally he spoke, more quietly now. "I didn't think it would blow up like this. I thought people would find it interesting, not destructive. But I hear you. Maybe I pushed too hard." Sandra nodded. "It's too late for apologies, Jason, but it's not too late to fix this. We're going to tell our side of the story. And if you want to stay relevant, you'll give us that chance." Jason paused, the weight of their words settling in. After a long moment, he finally spoke, his voice resigned. "All right, you've got your chance, but the world's already talking. There's no turning back now." The battle lines were drawn. Keanu and Sandra had made it clear that they weren't going to let anyone control their narrative. Not even Jason Pierce. They had taken the first step in reclaiming their power, but they both knew this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be filled with challenges, but together they were ready to face them head-on. As they left Jason's office, Keanu glanced at Sandra, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Ready for whatever comes next?" Sandra smiled back, her eyes steely, with determination. "Bring it on." The following days felt like a whirlwind. The moment Keanu and Sandra walked out of Jason Pierce's office, the public's reaction exploded in every direction. Media outlets couldn't get enough of the story, and social media was filled with heated debates, hashtags, and fan theories. Everyone had an opinion, and everyone felt they had a right to know the truth. Some fans supported them, praising Keanu and Sandra for standing their ground. They were tired of the media tearing apart celebrities for the sake of ratings. Others, however, felt betrayed. The footage of their private conversation had planted seeds of doubt, and now everyone was questioning whether the two actors were hiding something more than just a deep friendship. Keanu and Sandra truth trended for days, and the press wouldn't let up. The speculation grew more and more ridiculous, and soon, even the most harmless comment or gesture between Keanu and Sandra was scrutinized under the microscope of the public eye. Sandra and Keanu's phones constantly buzzed, but they tried their best to ignore the noise. They had one goal in mind: to take back control of their story. The pair sat down with their PR teams and crafted a statement for the media, a clear, concise message that would set the record straight once and for all. But before they could release it, the tabloids got their hands on another exclusive. This time it wasn't about their personal lives. Instead, the story claimed that Keanu and Sandra were at odds with each other, that their friendship was on the rocks. According to the sources, Sandra had been furious with Keanu for not speaking out sooner, and Keanu had apparently distanced himself from Sandra to protect his own image. When they read the article, both actors just stared at the screen, incredulous. "I can't believe this," Sandra said, running a hand through her hair. "They've taken everything we've said and twisted it into something completely different." Keanu sighed, shaking his head. "It's like they're trying to create a war between us. They want to make it look like we're falling apart, like we can't even talk to each other." Sandra's eyes narrowed. "This is exactly what we were afraid of. They're trying to pit us against each other. They think if they can cause enough tension, we'll break and give them the drama they want." Keanu leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping rhythmically against the desk. "We can't let them win. We've got to stick together and show them we're not playing their game. But we need to be smart about how we do this," Sandra nodded. "Right, we'll fight this with the truth. Let's go public with our statement. Let's do it our way, on our terms." They decided to hold a press conference, something direct and personal. They would speak to the world, not through a carefully worded statement, but with their own voices, explaining their side of the story. The world would hear the truth, not the sensationalized version the media had been peddling. The press conference was scheduled for the following week, and both Keanu and Sandra were nervous. They had no idea how the media would react, but they knew one thing for sure. This would be their opportunity to take back the narrative. They'd spent days preparing, making sure they were ready to answer any questions that might come their way. And this time, there would be no games, just honesty. As the day of the press conference arrived, the tension was palpable. The room was filled with journalists, photographers, and camera crews, all eagerly awaiting the moment Keanu and Sandra would step up to the podium. The air was thick with anticipation. Keanu and Sandra entered the room together, their expressions calm, but resolute. The crowd hushed as they took their places at the podium. Keanu spoke first, his voice steady as he addressed the room. "We're here today because there's been a lot of misinformation out there," Keanu began. "The footage that was aired on The Tonight Show was never meant to be public. It was a private conversation between two friends, two people who respect each other and have always had each other's backs." Sandra stepped forward, her tone firm and unwavering. "What happened on that stage wasn't just a betrayal of us, but of our friendship with the public. We've been in this business for decades, and what we've built together is not something that should be used for cheap entertainment. Jason Pierce had no right to air that conversation without our consent." The journalists shifted in their seats, their eyes fixed on the pair as they continued. Keanu added, "This is about more than just what was said on stage. This is about the way the media manipulates everything. Our lives, our friendships, our moments of vulnerability. We won't stand for it anymore." The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. The camera flashes went off in sporadic bursts, but Keanu and Sandra remained focused, unshaken. "We've both been in this industry long enough to know that this is part of the game. But the one thing we refuse to play is the game of betrayal." Sandra continued, "We're here today to set the record straight. We are friends, nothing more, nothing less, and we will continue to be friends for as long as we both live." The press conference lasted for over an hour, with the pair answering questions and debunking rumors one by one. By the time they finished, the air in the room felt different. For the first time since the fiasco began, there was a sense of clarity. The media may have been relentless, but Keanu and Sandra had done what they needed to do. They'd reclaimed their truth. But even after the press conference, the story didn't die down. The media storm continued, but the nature of the coverage changed. Some outlets began to support them, appreciating the way they handled the situation. Others, however, couldn't let go of their narrative. But Keanu and Sandra remained steady, in the face of the chaos, knowing that they had done the right thing. As the days passed, something strange began to happen. Fans started to rally around them, not just because they supported the actors, but because they saw in Keanu and Sandra's struggle something they understood. The battle to protect your privacy, your friendships, and your truth was something everyone could relate to. At the end of the week, Keanu and Sandra received a message from Jason Pierce himself. He wanted to apologize. "I went too far," he wrote. "I didn't consider the impact of what I did, and I'm truly sorry for the way I handled things. You both didn't deserve that." The apology was brief, but it meant something. It wasn't the resolution they had hoped for, but it was a step in the right direction. The media had painted them as enemies, but they were walking away from this with their friendship intact. And that was what mattered most. Keanu and Sandra spent the next few weeks laying low, away from the media frenzy. But they both knew that the world was still watching, still waiting to see what would happen next. They had faced the storm, and though the winds of gossip still howled around them, they had emerged stronger and more united than ever. Keanu finally turned to Sandra. After a long silence, his voice light. "So, what now?" Sandra smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile. "Now we go back to what we do best." And with that, the storm finally began to settle. For a few weeks, the storm had settled. Keanu and Sandra continued with their careers, their personal lives slowly returning to a semblance of normality. They had both spent years navigating the complexities of fame, but it seemed the media's obsession with them had finally cooled, or so they thought. It was a Tuesday morning when the phone rang, breaking the calm. Sandra's manager, Derek, was on the other end, his voice tight, almost strained. "Sandra, you need to listen to this. It's important. I'm sending you something. Now please just read it." Sandra felt a cold chill settle in her stomach. She wasn't sure what Derek was talking about, but the urgency in his voice was enough to raise her hackles. She glanced at Keanu, who was sitting across from her in the hotel room, flipping through a script. "What is it?" she asked Derek, her heart starting to race. "I don't want to scare you," Derek replied, "but it looks like someone from your past is coming back into the picture, someone you might not want to hear from." She heard the sound of a document opening on the other end, followed by a sigh from Derek. "It's a letter addressed to you, and it's from someone who has no business being in your life." Sandra's hand froze. Mid-air as she reached for the phone, she glanced at Keanu, who had stopped reading, his attention now fully on her. "Who is it?" Sandra's voice was shaky, though she tried to hide the anxiety creeping up on her. "I'm sending it over. Just look for yourself." Minutes later, Sandra's phone buzzed with the message. She opened the attachment, her eyes scanning the letter in disbelief. The words hit her like a punch to the gut. "Dear Sandra, it's been a long time. Too long, actually. I've been keeping my distance for reasons you know well, but I think the time has come for us to finally confront the truth. The lies we told ourselves, the lies I told you. It's all coming to light now, and it seems I can't stay hidden any longer. You know who I am. I've been watching, waiting for the right moment to speak, and that moment is now. You might not believe it, but I'm not the same person I was back then. I've changed. I need to tell you everything. Please meet me." Sandra dropped the phone, her eyes wide with shock. Jason. The name brought a flood of memories crashing into her mind, memories of a time she had spent years trying to forget. Jason was someone from her past, someone she had loved deeply, but someone whose betrayal had shattered her world. Keanu's voice broke through her stunned silence. "What is it?" Sandra swallowed hard, trying to steady her racing pulse. "It's from Jason." Keanu's expression shifted from curiosity to concern as he stood up, moving toward her. "Jason Pierce? The guy who put you in the hot seat? On the show?" Sandra nodded, her hand trembling as she held the phone. "No, not that Jason. This is someone from my past, someone I thought I'd left behind." Keanu's brow furrowed as he sat beside her. "What did he say?" He wants to meet. He says he's changed." Sandra's voice wavered. "But I don't know if I can trust him. I thought he was out of my life for good." Keanu's eyes softened with understanding, but there was something else in them, an unspoken concern. "You don't have to do this if you don't want to. Sandy, I'm here for you, whatever you decide." Sandra met his gaze, his unwavering support a comfort in the chaos. "I don't know what to do, Keanu." Part of me wants to forget this ever happened, but another part of me knows I have to face him. He might hold the answers to questions I've been avoiding for years. Keanu placed a hand on her shoulder. Whatever you choose, I'll be here with you. You don't have to face it alone. Later that day, after a long, agonizing internal debate, Sandra made the decision. She would meet Jason on her own terms. She called Derek to let him know and set up the meeting. It would be at a small cafe in the city, a neutral location where they could talk privately without the eyes of the world watching. The moment she walked into the cafe, her heart pounded in her chest. The place was quiet, the soft hum of conversation in the background. Her eyes scanned the room until she saw him, Jason. He looked older, a little grayer than she remembered, but there was still something about him that sent a shiver down her spine. He stood up when he saw her, a hesitant smile crossing his face. "Sandra, it's been a long time." Sandra didn't smile back. She wasn't sure she could. "I wasn't expecting this, Jason. I don't even know why I'm here." Jason nodded, his eyes filled with regret. "I understand. I didn't expect you to forgive me, but I owe you an explanation. I need you to hear me out." Sandra hesitated, but then took a seat across from him. "I'm listening." Jason took a deep breath, clearly gathering his thoughts. "I don't know how to say this, but the person I was back then, I was a mess. I was selfish. I hurt you in ways I can never undo. And I've spent years trying to make sense of what happened between us. I thought I had it figured out, but the truth is I didn't." Sandra's eyes narrowed. "You didn't figure anything out, Jason. You destroyed everything we had. I thought we were building something real, but you lied to me. You betrayed me. You walked away without a word, and I was left picking up the pieces." "I know," he said softly, his voice filled with sorrow, "and I regret it every day. I hurt you in ways I can never make up for, but I can't keep running from the past anymore. I thought I could stay away, but I realize now that I need to face what I did." Sandra's heart pounded as the old wounds resurfaced. "And what do you want from me, Jason? Do you think I can just forget everything and forgive you?" Jason shook his head, his expression pleading. "No, I don't expect forgiveness, but I want to tell you the truth, everything that happened, and I want to explain why I did what I did." Sandra remained silent for a long moment, staring at the man sitting across from her. The man she had once loved, and who had once shattered her world. A part of her wanted to leave right there, to walk out of that cafe and never look back. But another part, the part that still wanted answers, urged her to stay and listen. Finally she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "Okay, tell me everything." As Jason began to speak, recounting the events that had led to their broken relationship, Sandra felt herself pulled back into a past she had long buried. The secrets he revealed were painful, but they also provided a clarity she had been searching for. But as the conversation continued, Sandra realized that there was something deeper at play, something that might not only affect her past, but could also impact her future. Jason's words hung heavy in the air between them as he continued. Sandra listened intently, her heart torn between anger, disbelief, and a strange sense of relief. She had spent years pushing the memories of her relationship with Jason into the farthest corners of her mind. But now, every word he spoke felt like a key unlocking that long-locked door. "I know this is a lot to process, but I need you to understand," Jason said, his voice shaky. "The reason I walked away, the reason I didn't tell you the truth, it wasn't just about us. It was about something bigger, something I couldn't tell you at the time." Sandra crossed her arms, her fingers trembling. "What are you talking about, Jason? What could possibly be bigger than us? We were building a life together." "I know," Jason whispered, his face contorted in regret. "But it wasn't just me who made that decision. There were other people involved, people who controlled what happened between us." Sandra leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "What are you saying? Who else was involved? And why didn't you tell me this before?" Jason took a deep breath, collecting his thoughts. "There was someone else who wanted to control the narrative around you, around both of us. Someone who knew how public our relationship was becoming and how much attention we were getting. They didn't want us together. They didn't want me to be with you because they knew the power we had together. Sandra's head spun. She could hardly believe what she was hearing. Who? Who are you talking about? Jason looked around nervously, as if checking to see if anyone was listening in on their conversation. It was a higher-up in the industry, someone who had ties to the media, who controlled the stories that got out. I don't know exactly who, but I know that they didn't want us, especially me, to get too close to you. Sandra's mind raced, trying to make sense of it. So, you're telling me that someone in the industry sabotaged our relationship? I don't know if it was sabotage, but they definitely manipulated the situation, Jason said, his voice low. They wanted to make sure we wouldn't work, that I'd walk away from you. They played me, and they played you. I was too blind to see it at the time, but now I can't ignore it anymore. Sandra's breath caught in her throat. This is insane. Why didn't you tell me this sooner, Jason? I spent all these years thinking I was the one who messed everything up. I thought it was just me who couldn't make it work. I know, he said, his eyes filled with sorrow. But I couldn't tell you, I couldn't drag you into that world. I thought I was protecting you. Sandra shook her head, feeling the anger welling up inside her again. You think you were protecting me by lying to me, by leaving me in the dark? How could you think that was the right thing to do? Jason seemed to shrink under her gaze, but his voice remained steady. I made a mistake, the biggest mistake of my life. But I had no idea how deep it went, Sandra. I didn't know that the people pulling the strings would go to such lengths to keep us apart. Sandra was silent for a moment, processing everything he'd said. She didn't know what to believe. The idea that someone had manipulated her life to such a degree was hard to accept, but it made a twisted sort of sense. The media frenzy around her and Jason had always felt orchestrated, like someone had a vested interest in keeping their relationship in the shadows. But who had that kind of power? Do you have any idea who it is? She asked, her voice calm, but filled with suspicion. Jason hesitated, looking down at his hands. No, I never got a name, but I've seen their influence. And now with everything that's happened between you and Keanu, I think it's time you knew the truth. At the mention of Keanu's name, Sandra stiffened. The relationship between her and Keanu was something she had always guarded, something sacred. To even hint that this higher power might be involved in her current life was a terrifying thought. I don't know if I can trust you, Jason, Sandra said, her voice tinged with disbelief. You've already lied to me once. You've already betrayed me. Why should I believe you now? Jason's eyes were desperate. I know I don't deserve your trust. I don't. But I need you to hear me out. There's more at stake here than just our past. This is bigger than anything we ever realized. If you don't figure this out now, it's going to affect everything. Sandra's pulse quickened. What are you talking about? What's bigger than our past? Jason leaned in, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Keanu, he's in the same position I was. He doesn't know it yet, but he's being used in the same game. Sandra's eyes widened in shock. What do you mean? Keanu's not involved in any of this? Jason shook his head, urgency creeping into his voice. I don't know the details, but I can feel it. They're trying to play him just like they played me. You don't realize how deep this goes. And if you don't figure it out, you and Keanu are both going to be caught in this web. They won't stop until they control everything. Sandra's thoughts were spinning. The idea that Keanu could be caught up in this was both terrifying and confusing. Could Jason be telling the truth? Could Keanu, the person she trusted most, be involved in something darker than she could have imagined? Back at the hotel, Sandra couldn't shake the conversation with Jason from her mind. She hadn't expected to walk out of that cafe with more questions than answers, but here she was, consumed by uncertainty. Keanu was waiting for her when she returned, sitting in the hotel lobby, his eyes filled with concern. Did you talk to him? Keanu asked as soon as he saw her. He could tell from her face that something had changed. Sandra nodded slowly, sitting down beside him. Yeah, I talked to Jason. Keanu reached for her hand, his touch grounding her. And? Sandra exhaled, her mind racing as she tried to process everything she had learned. He told me things, Keanu. Things I don't know how to even begin to process. Keanu's grip tightened, his concern deepening. What did he say? Sandra hesitated, trying to find the right words. He said that someone in the industry, someone powerful, has been pulling the strings in our lives, controlling everything. He said they didn't want us together, that they manipulated our relationship, and now he thinks they're doing the same thing to you." Keanu's eyes darkened. "What? Are you saying this is all some kind of conspiracy?" "I don't know," Sandra said, her voice shaky, "but I have a feeling he's telling the truth. I can't shake the feeling that there's more going on here than we realize." Keanu stared at her for a long moment, and then, in a voice filled with determination, he said, "Then we'll find out who's behind this, together." The following days were a blur of emotions for Sandra and Keanu. The weight of Jason's revelations hung over them like a storm cloud, neither of them fully understanding the depth of the situation, but knowing that they couldn't just ignore it. It felt like they were standing on the edge of something huge, something that had the potential to change everything. They didn't have answers, but they both knew they needed to start asking the right questions. "Keanu," Sandra began, her voice steady but laced with concern as they sat together in their hotel room. "I've been thinking. We need to figure out who's behind all this. If Jason's right, then someone's been orchestrating things from the start. And if they've been controlling our lives, we can't just sit back and let it happen again." Keanu, who had been pacing back and forth, stopped in his tracks and looked at Sandra. "I agree. We can't let this go on. But we need to be careful. Whoever is behind this is powerful. They've managed to manipulate people before, and they could do it again." Sandra nodded. "That's exactly why we need to be smart about this. We need to find out who's behind this, but we can't just rush in without thinking. We've already seen how the media can twist things." Keanu paused, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "I think we need to start by talking to people we trust, people who might know more about this industry. We've been so isolated, so focused on what's been in front of us, that we've ignored the bigger picture. It's time to dig deeper." Sandra agreed. It was time to go beyond their comfort zones and trust that there were people in the industry who might have the answers they needed. The first person they reached out to was Derek, Sandra's manager. He had been in the industry for decades and had seen the highs and lows of Hollywood's undercurrents. If anyone had insight into the hidden world of power brokers, it would be him. Derek's office was located in the heart of the entertainment district, a place that felt like a different world, glamorous, fast-paced, and cutthroat. Sandra and Keanu made their way there together, their nerves palpable as they prepared to confront the man who had been a part of Sandra's career for so long. When Derek opened the door, his face registered a brief flash of surprise before he masked it with a smile. "Sandra, Keanu, good to see you both. Come in, come in." Sandra and Keanu entered, exchanging polite but strained pleasantries. They all sat down, and Derek poured them each a drink, a standard gesture in the industry, though it felt oddly stiff in the tense atmosphere. "So what brings you here today?" Derek asked, his voice casual, though Sandra could tell there was an edge to it. He wasn't sure what they were really after, and she didn't blame him. They hadn't exactly explained everything to him yet. Sandra wasted no time. "Derek, we need your help. There's something going on, something bigger than we realized. And we need to know if you've ever heard of anyone manipulating things behind the scenes, someone pulling strings, trying to control people's careers." Derek's eyes flickered momentarily, a look of guarded concern flashing across his face. He took a slow sip of his drink before speaking. "You mean like a conspiracy?" Keanu leaned forward. "Something like that. We think there's a person or a group out there who has been orchestrating events in our lives. We need to know if you've ever encountered anything like that." Derek hesitated, then leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. "I've been around long enough to know there are a lot of unsavory characters in this business. People who have too much power and not enough morals. But I'm not sure what you're implying. Are you saying that someone specifically targeted you two?" Sandra glanced at Keanu and then back at Derek. "Yes. Jason, he's been telling me things. And we think it all leads to someone trying to keep us apart. Someone who's been manipulating the media and controlling the narrative about us." Derek's face became more serious. "I've heard rumors," he admitted, his voice lowering. "Not just about you two, but about others in the industry as well. There's been talk of powerful figures pulling the strings behind the scenes, shaping public opinion, creating stories to fit their agenda. But those kinds of things that they're never spoken about openly. People get hurt if they dig too deep. Keanu leaned in. Who are these people? And why are they doing this? Derek sighed, glancing around as if making sure no one was listening. It's not just one person, Keanu, it's a network, a web of people, agents, producers, media executives, who've all been working together for years. They influence everything from casting decisions to public opinion. They control what gets published, who gets famous, and who gets thrown under the bus. If they see someone as a threat, they'll take them down no matter the cost. Sandra felt a chill creep up her spine. So this isn't just about me and Keanu. They've done this to other people too? Exactly, Derek confirmed. It's all about control. They want to dictate who the public loves, who they hate, who gets the career and who doesn't. They want to be in control of the entire narrative of the industry. Keanu's voice was cold as he spoke. So Jason was right. We've been pawns in someone else's game. Derek nodded grimly. Unfortunately, yes, but there's more. These people don't just manipulate careers, they manipulate lives. They get into your personal world, twist your relationships, make you doubt everyone around you. That's how they maintain control. Sandra's heart sank. Is there any way to stop them? How do we fight something this big? Derek's eyes softened for a moment. It won't be easy. The people behind this are powerful. But there are cracks in the system. If you expose them, if you get the truth out there, it'll shake everything up. But it's dangerous. You have to be prepared for the fallout. Keanu clenched his jaw, determination setting in. We're ready. Sandra nodded, though uncertainty lingered in her eyes. This was bigger than she had ever imagined. But one thing was clear now. There was no turning back. They had to find out who was pulling the strings, and they had to stop them, no matter the cost. That night, Sandra lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The truth was slowly coming to light, but the pieces still didn't fit together. Who were the masterminds behind this network, and what was their endgame? She turned over, reaching for her phone, but before she could pick it up, Keanu's voice broke the silence. You know, he said quietly, this is just the beginning. Sandra nodded, feeling a mix of dread and determination flood her veins. I know, and we're going to fight it, together. The days blurred together as Sandra and Keanu dove deeper into the tangled web of power, manipulation, and secrecy that they had unknowingly become a part of. They couldn't just sit idle. They had to find the source. They had to expose the people who had been pulling the strings in their lives, manipulating not only their careers, but their very relationships. Despite the looming danger, there was an undeniable sense of purpose between them. Keanu's quiet determination had begun to inspire Sandra. She hadn't expected to feel so driven, but the injustice they were uncovering filled her with a resolve she didn't know she had. I've been thinking, Keanu said one morning, as they sat together in the hotel room, their phones spread out in front of them. We need to start connecting the dots. It's not just about who's been controlling the media. We need to find out who benefits from all of this, who gains from keeping us apart. Sandra leaned back in her chair, deep in thought. You're right. We've been so focused on the personal side of things, on the betrayals and the lies, that we haven't really looked at the bigger picture. If this is all part of a plan, there must be someone or something at the top pulling the strings. We need to figure out who's really behind this. Keanu nodded. Exactly. Let's look at all the pieces. What do we know so far? Jason said. That someone in the industry, someone with power, has been controlling our narrative. We know it's not just about us, there are others involved, but we still don't know who. Sandra glanced at the phone in her hand, her fingers nervously tracing the screen. Derek said it was a network, a web of people, but he didn't give us any names. If they've been manipulating our lives this whole time, they've got to be somewhere in plain sight, right? How do we find them? Keanu stood up, pacing the room with a purposeful energy. We start with the media outlets. Who's been covering our stories? Who's been reporting on our relationship, on the fallout? We've got to find out who has the most to gain by keeping this all going. And we can't do this alone. We need help. Sandra's heart skipped a beat at the mention of help. This wasn't just about unearthing dirty secrets anymore. It was about stepping into a world full of shadows, where trust was a luxury they couldn't afford. But she knew they couldn't face this alone. "I know someone who might be able to help," Sandra said, her voice steady. "A journalist, someone I worked with a while back. She's not afraid to go after the truth, no matter how dangerous it gets." Keanu looked at her, a hint of concern flashing in his eyes. "Are you sure? If she's going to be involved, we need to be certain she's on our side." Sandra nodded. "I've worked with her before. I trust her. Her name's Rachel. If anyone can dig up the information we need, it's her." With a plan in motion, Sandra reached out to Rachel, sending a message detailing what they had uncovered so far. It didn't take long before Rachel responded, agreeing to meet with them. The meeting took place at a dimly lit cafe on the outskirts of town, a place where they wouldn't be easily noticed. Rachel, a sharp-witted journalist known for her tenacity, greeted them with a firm handshake. "You've got something big on your hands, don't you?" she said, her eyes scanning both Sandra and Keanu with a piercing intensity. Sandra nodded. "We've been digging into this for a while now. Someone has been controlling the narrative of our lives, using the media to manipulate our careers and personal relationships. We need your help to find out who's behind it." Rachel's expression hardened. "I've heard rumors. There are always whispers in this town about powerful people pulling the strings, but getting hard evidence, now that's another thing." Keanu leaned in, his voice low. "We don't just want rumors, we want names. We need to find out who's been orchestrating this." Rachel studied them for a long moment before speaking. "All right, I'm in. But you need to understand this isn't going to be easy. The people behind this, they won't just let us dig around without consequences. But if you're ready to go all in, then so am I." Sandra's pulse quickened. This was it. There was no going back now. "We're ready," Sandra said, her voice filled with resolve. Over the next few days, Rachel worked tirelessly behind the scenes, reaching out to sources in the media, the entertainment industry, and even the underground world of Hollywood power brokers. Sandra and Keanu were left to sift through the information they had gathered, connecting the dots as best as they could. Rachel's findings were unsettling. The deeper she dug, the more she uncovered a pattern. The media outlets that had been most aggressive in spinning their stories, painting Sandra and Keanu as a couple on the brink of collapse, creating friction between them, even planting false narratives, were all owned by the same network of companies. The same companies that also had ties to major production houses, agents, and even politicians. "This is huge," Rachel said during one of their meetings, her voice low with awe. "It's like a secret society, but it's all out in the open, under the guise of the entertainment industry. These people control what gets seen, what gets published, and what gets destroyed. And it's all for profit. Power." Keanu clenched his fists. "We have to expose them. We can't let them keep controlling our lives like this." Sandra felt a rising sense of urgency. "But how do we even start? This goes way deeper than just us." Rachel's eyes gleamed with determination. "We start by getting the media to notice. We make sure the right stories are getting out there. We can't take them down all at once, but if we expose the key players, the ones who've been orchestrating all this, then we'll have a chance to turn the tide." Sandra exchanged a glance with Keanu, feeling a surge of determination. "Let's do it." As they began to form their plan, Sandra and Keanu found themselves walking a tightrope between truth and danger. The more they uncovered, the more they realized how far-reaching this conspiracy was. But they couldn't back down now. Each step brought them closer to the heart of the web, and each step made them more vulnerable. The tension in the air was thick as they prepared to go public with their findings. It was all coming to a head. The fallout would be massive, and there was no telling who would be caught in the blast. But one thing was certain. Sandra and Keanu were ready to fight for their lives, their careers, and the truth. The day had arrived. After days of research, countless phone calls, and secret meetings, Sandra, Keanu, and Rachel had finally put together the pieces of the puzzle. The network controlling their lives, manipulating the media, and pulling the strings behind the scenes was no longer just a vague theory. It was real, and they had the evidence to prove it. But as the weight of their discovery settled in, so did the overwhelming fear. The people they were about to expose weren't just media moguls or corrupt executives. They were a powerful group with connections in high places, people who wouldn't hesitate to crush anyone who stood in their way. Sandra paced the small room of the hotel suite they had been using as their headquarters. Her mind raced with thoughts of the possible repercussions. Would they retaliate? Would they try to ruin everything they had worked for? Keanu sat at the table, his eyes intense as he scrolled through the documents Rachel had gathered. His expression remained calm, but Sandra could see the tension in his jaw, the way his fingers tapped against the wood. "This is bigger than we thought," Rachel said, standing next to them. "These people don't just control the media. They control the narrative of the entire entertainment industry. If we expose them, it'll send shockwaves through Hollywood." Sandra stopped pacing and turned to face them. "I know, but we can't let fear control us. We've come this far. If we back down now, it'll only prove that they have the power to keep us silent. We have to go public, and we have to do it right." Keanu looked up from the papers and met Sandra's gaze. "You're right. We have to expose them for who they really are, but we need to make sure we have everything lined up before we do. If we move too soon, we risk them covering it up before it even gets out." Rachel nodded. "We've got the evidence. We've identified the key players. Now, we need to make sure the right people hear our story. We need the media to back us up." Sandra felt a sudden rush of clarity. They had done the hard part, gathering the evidence, uncovering the truth. Now it was time to tell the world. The plan was set. They would hold a press conference revealing everything they had uncovered. Sandra and Keanu would go on record, speaking directly to the press and the public about the manipulation, the conspiracy, and the people responsible for it all. It would be a gamble, but it was the only way forward. The night before the press conference, Sandra found herself alone in the suite, staring out the window. The city lights twinkled below, casting a faint glow on the streets. It was hard to believe that just a few weeks ago, her life had been so different. Now she was standing on the edge of something that could change everything. Keanu walked up behind her, his presence steady and reassuring. "You okay?" he asked quietly. Sandra didn't turn around but nodded. "I'm scared. What if we fail? What if they come after us? What if everything we've done leads to nothing?" Keanu's voice was soft but filled with certainty. "Then we try again. And again. Until we win. We're doing the right thing, Sandra. We can't let them control our lives anymore." Sandra felt a knot in her chest loosen. Keanu was right. They couldn't back down. This was bigger than their careers. It was about taking back control of their lives, their identities, and their future. She turned to face him. "You're right. No matter what happens tomorrow, we have to keep pushing. We can't let them win." Keanu smiled, a small, reassuring smile. "Exactly. We're in this together." The next morning, the press conference began. The media gathered in a large conference room, reporters and cameras buzzing with anticipation. Sandra and Keanu stood at the podium, flanked by Rachel, who had made sure every detail was in place. As Sandra and Keanu stepped up to the microphone, the room fell silent. Cameras clicked and reporters whispered, eager to hear what they had to say. Sandra's heart raced, but she steadied herself. This was the moment. She took a deep breath and began. "We're here today because we believe in the truth. We've spent the last few weeks uncovering a network of people who have been controlling the media and manipulating our careers, our relationships, and our lives. These people have orchestrated everything, from the stories about us being a falling couple to the rumors that have kept us apart. They've pulled the strings behind the scenes, and we're here to expose them." The room erupted in chaos. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, and the air buzzed with disbelief. Sandra held up her hand to silence the crowd. "This isn't just about us. This is about the system that's been manipulating not just our lives, but the lives of many others in this industry. Powerful people who have used their influence to control the narrative, to shape public opinion, to destroy careers when they don't fit their agenda. We're here to put a stop to it." Keanu stepped forward, his voice steady but filled with conviction. "We've gathered evidence. We know who's behind this, and we're not backing down. It's time for the world to know the truth." Rachel, standing off to the side, opened a folder and placed several documents on the table in front of the press. These are the key players, the people who have been orchestrating the media stories, controlling the press, and manipulating the public. We've traced their connections, and we have the proof. The reporters surged forward, scrambling to get closer, to ask questions, to learn more. But Sandra and Keanu stood firm, their resolve unwavering. Hours later, after the press conference had ended, Sandra and Keanu found themselves alone in their suite again, the weight of the moment still settling in. "We did it," Sandra said, her voice a mixture of disbelief and relief. Keanu nodded, but there was no joy in his expression, only a quiet determination. "This is just the beginning." Sandra sat down on the couch, her thoughts racing. "What happens now?" "We wait," Keanu replied. "We wait and see how they react. But no matter what happens, we can't back down. This is bigger than us." Sandra looked out the window again, her heart heavy with the uncertainty of what was to come. She knew there would be repercussions, but she also knew one thing for sure. They had taken the first step in reclaiming their lives. And whatever came next, they would face it together. The press conference had shaken the industry to its core. As the days passed, the story they'd uncovered spread like wildfire across social media, news outlets, and blogs. Every headline screamed about the shocking revelations, and Sandra and Keanu found themselves at the center of a storm. It was all out there now: the conspiracy, the media manipulation, the powerful network of individuals who had been controlling their lives. The world was watching, and everyone had an opinion. Some applauded their courage for speaking out. Others questioned their motives, wondering if they had really been manipulated, or if they were simply trying to salvage their careers. But one thing was certain: no one could ignore the truth they had exposed. As they sat together in their suite, the weight of what had just happened began to sink in. Sandra gazed out the window, the glow of the city lights reflecting in her eyes. It was a strange feeling, knowing that the world now knew what they had uncovered. A mix of relief and uncertainty lingered in the air. Keanu broke the silence, his voice calm but serious. "We've done what we came here to do, but this isn't over. They won't go down without a fight." Sandra nodded. She had known it wouldn't be easy. They were up against some of the most powerful people in the entertainment industry. But she had also learned something important over the past few weeks. Sometimes the hardest battles were the ones that needed to be fought, no matter the cost. "We can't stop now," she said softly. "We've exposed them, but the fight isn't over until they're held accountable." Keanu looked at her, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "I thought you'd say that." The first wave of retaliation hit faster than they expected. The media tried to discredit them, painting them as attention seekers or opportunists trying to capitalize on a scandal. But this time, it wasn't as easy to silence them. The truth they had shared was too powerful, and people were starting to ask questions. As they prepared for the next steps, Sandra and Keanu knew they had to stay ahead of the game. They couldn't let the powerful people behind this conspiracy regain control of the narrative. They had to keep pushing, even if it meant risking everything. Rachel, their fearless ally in this fight, had spent the past few days working tirelessly to dig even deeper. She had uncovered more names, more connections, and more dirt that could bring down the people responsible for the media manipulation. "They're scrambling," Rachel said one evening, her eyes wide with excitement. "We've hit them where it hurts. They're trying to cover their tracks, but it's too late. The truth is out there now." Sandra felt a spark of hope. "So what's next?" Rachel leaned forward, her expression serious. "We keep pushing. We take the story to the next level. Bigger interviews, more detailed reports, and we make sure that we're not the only ones speaking out. The more people who know what's really going on, the harder it'll be for them to shut us down." Keanu stood up, his usual quiet confidence radiating from him. "We've come this far. There's no turning back now." As the weeks went by, the media frenzy continued. But slowly the power of the truth began to shift the tide. Investigations were launched, new exposés were published, and slowly but surely the people who had been controlling the media were exposed for their manipulation and deceit. The world was starting to see the extent of the conspiracy, and the power that had once been wielded by those in control was beginning to crumble. It was a long, exhausting battle, but Sandra and Keanu refused to back down. They fought for what they believed in, and the truth was finally starting to shine through the cracks of the powerful empire that had once ruled over them. One night, as Sandra stood at the window again, watching the lights of the city below, Keanu joined her, standing by her side in quiet solidarity. The storm wasn't over, but there was a calmness between them now, an understanding that they had done what they set out to do, and they had done it together. "This isn't just about us anymore," Sandra said, her voice soft but resolute. "It's about everyone who's been affected by this system, everyone who's been manipulated and controlled. We've opened a door, and we can't close it." "Now," Keanu nodded. "No, we can't." They stood there together in silence, knowing that the fight was far from over. But they had already won, in a way. They had found their truth, and in doing so, had given others the courage to find theirs as well. In the weeks that followed, the tides continued to turn. Lawsuits were filed, investigations launched, and slowly but surely the corrupt individuals who had been controlling the media were brought to justice. It wasn't an easy process, and there were still battles to be fought. But Sandra and Keanu had started a movement, one that would forever change the entertainment industry. And as for Sandra and Keanu, their relationship, once twisted by media lies, was now stronger than ever. They had faced impossible odds, been torn apart by forces they couldn't control, but in the end they had come through it together. The truth had set them free, and they were no longer just victims of the system. They had become warriors in their own right. A few months later, they sat together at a small cafe in Los Angeles, laughing quietly as they shared a coffee. The chaos of the past seemed distant now, like a bad dream they had both survived. "This feels normal," Sandra said, taking a sip of her coffee. Keanu smiled, his eyes warm. "It's a new normal." Sandra looked at him, her heart full. "It's a normal we can live with." And as they sat there, surrounded by the ordinary hum of life, Sandra realized that, no matter what came next, they had won the most important battle of all, the battle for their lives, their truth, and their future.